All right, let's be honest here. Our web page looks super ugly. And it's mostly because in order to go over how to style the page, I just think it's easy to start off with some styling that just makes it super clear what it is. But I think now it's about time. Let's try to make our web page look a little bit nicer. And as we go through that process, we'll probably learn a whole bunch of things along the way. So this might be split over several videos. Um, but let's just get started. So I think for one, let me just start by going back to the browser defaults where we're going to fill in this style tag here with our styling, but I want to just make sure I remove all the styling from the entire page. And I don't know where else, but let me just do Command F and I'll look for style. I'll look to see where we have. It looks like we just have these two instances right here. So I think I'm done. I don't have any more styles. So I'm going to save that. Let's refresh the page and let's see. So it looks like we're back to what the browser's default styling looks like. All right, so let's get started here. So I know that I'm not really a fan of this type of font, which is called a serif font. A serif font is like all these little like extra items over here, like these little fancy things that are shown at the end of each letter. But, personally, I prefer a sans serif font, which means it's French for without the serif. So let's just apply that. So I'm going to apply that to the body of the page because I know that's going to get inherited by all the other tags that are children of the body. So this is just a simple way for me to do it. It may not be the best long-term way, but that's the way I plan to do it right now. So I'll make the font family be sans serif. And I could pick a specific font if I want, but for now I'm just going to be pretty loose about it. This actually means that on each computer, whatever the default sans serif font is for for that computer will be what will show in the browser. So it may not look exactly the same for everybody, but you can already see that. Okay, it gives it a different look now that we have this different font. I also want to give the background of my page a little bit of a very, very light shade of gray. So I can do that, and I'm going to apply that also to the body because then I know it'll apply to the entire page. So to do that, I can say like background color, and if I try like light gray even, I just think that's going to be way too dark, but I'll try it. That feels pretty dark to me. So there's actually some different ways of describing the color that you want. I can actually lower the opacity, which is how much light sort of like shines through, or actually how opaque the item is. So it's sort of describing how much light doesn't pass through. So if I make it really like a low opacity here, then a lot of the light will shine through. So I'll refresh that. You can see it's not like pure white, but it's a little bit more like what I'm going for. Now, let me just make the font a little bit smaller here so we can see. This color is now specified as RGBA. Now, RGB this is like a color scheme of how computers can specify the color. So it turns out that with just the colors, I guess these are like primary or natural colors, red, green, and blue, whatever values those are, that actually can make it appear to be anything. So with just those three values, you can specify any of the colors. So in fact, I can change the color by changing like the hue, and I can also move my mouse around here and get some color like that. And I can save it. And now I get this little like greenish thing. And again, that's mostly because I have a very low opacity. So I bring that up, the color will be a little bit more vibrant. And you can see I get that kind of color. But the point is, some combination of red, green, and blue can specify whatever color you want. And then the fourth value is called alpha. That's why it's represented by an A here. It's alpha is basically the opacity. I think it's pretty hard to know what exact values of red, green, and blue would give you any sort of color. I think it's not very predictable for most people, but you'll probably not specify it by putting in the numbers yourself. It's easier to just use these types of tools. So if you don't have it in your editor, then you can go find it probably online, just like a red, green, blue picker. So I'm going to just jump back to maybe something more on like the grayscale. If I move my mouse all the way over here, you'll see that the values actually end up sort of all the same. When the red, the green, and the blue are all the same value, it ends up being a grayish color. So I'm going to jump this opacity back down, 25, about 25%, you can say, or 0.25. I'll save that and I'll refresh. And I get this off-white. And the other thing is, I want the color of all the text to not be like fully black. It gives it like a kind of harsh feel. So I'm going to tone that down a little bit. So I'll say color, and I can also specify RGBA here. Maybe I'll start with black, and then I'll just use this picker to tone it down a little bit. So maybe I'll just pick black, but I'll go at 80% roughly. So I'll save that and I'll refresh. And you can see, maybe it's not super obvious. Maybe I don't know if it's going to come through in the video, but it is a little bit, it's not like fully black, so it's not quite as harsh. And that did apply to all of the text in here. Cool. I also am looking at the Sesame Chicken. I do think that it'll look a little bit better if it's placed in the center. So I'm going to do that, H1, and that is the text align property. Save that and refresh. All right. Now I would really like if this image here kind of stretched all the way from one end to the other. And I'm going to do that a little bit differently. So right here, I have the image as the source in an image tag, but there's another way to do it. I can actually put the background image property, and I can specify a URL, and that URL will be this. So let me save that, and we'll see how that turns out. So it's kind of hard to see, but part of the image has started to come through. But the thing is, the image is just so big that you can't really see it. So how can we see it? Well, for one, the height of this box is already it's pretty thin. So I want some more space on the top and bottom of all this text over here. So as a simple thing, what I can do is I can say the height here is going to be, well, I'm just going to guess right now. I'm going to say 100 pixels. So that's 100 px. And I'll refresh. It gives me a little bit more space, and I'll bump that up to like 200. And now we can start to see the picture coming through. But I really want it to be like, I want maybe to max out the width of this image, and so that the height will be, maybe it'll be cut off a little bit differently. But right now I'm just getting a little bit of, I'm getting just like a small sliver of this image over here, maybe like that sort of section right there. And I really want more. So there's some properties about the background image that I can adjust in order to make the image fit in a little bit more to its space. So that property is going to be background size, I believe. I'm going to try one called cover. Let's see how that plays out. So that feels a little bit more right to me. It looks like we have the entire width of the image, and it's just cut off because we don't have the full height. But I think that's fine for right now. And I can try another one, like maybe if I want sort of more of the center of the image rather than the top of the image, although I do like it. It shows a little bit of like the red there. It gives a little bit more like diversity in the picture. But let's try background position. I can say center, save that, refresh. And now we got sort of like a different view of this image. Like sort of think of it like the window of this image that's applying here as the background. I'm going to go back to what I had before, which is, I guess, sort of like the default background position top. So I'll just specify it that way. I don't need this image anymore because I'm capturing that in the top of the page. Also, I've put in this section, I think this was sort of like a artifact of one of the earlier demonstrations just showing how you can like nest properties, but I don't need that. Now, what I really want is the sesame chicken here. I don't want it like bunched up to the top here. I kind of want that in the middle actually. So one of the things I can do is instead of specifying the height here, I'm going to specify a different property. So I'll save that, I'll come back, and you can see that above the word Sesame Chicken here, above our title, it's pretty thin. There's really not a lot of space, and the same below. But there's a property called padding, and the way padding works is it's kind of like what's the space that goes around the content. So I'll show you. It probably makes more sense if I do it this way. Let me say I'll do padding top, and I'll say maybe 20 pixels, and I'll also do padding bottom, and I'll make that 50 pixels for right now just so we can see some of the difference. So I save it, and now I kind of gained like 20 pixels here of space above and about 50 pixels here below. So that's kind of what happened there. Now, in order to make, I want first of all the height of this image to be a little bit higher, and I also want the space to be equal. So I'll set the spaces to be like 100 pixels for each, the top and the bottom, and we'll see how that turns out. And now I have my text Sesame Chicken in the middle. It's really hard to see though, so one thing I can do is for this H1, I can set my color to be white, and that will override the color that we specified in the body. So I'll save that, and I'll come here. That's still really not very clear to read, so let's figure out how we can fix that. So I'm thinking that in order to solve this problem where the text is just like not really super readable, I'm thinking of making this entire background image be a little bit darker, like apply some sort of like filter on top of it, to let the white text be a little bit more readable. So to demonstrate how I'm going to achieve that, I'll start with like a really simple example. So it turns out for the background image, you can specify multiple images or multiple forms for that. So let me just try to demonstrate. There's something called a linear gradient, and you can see it's helping me fill that out, and I'll just make it like black and white for right now. And I'll put a comma in order to separate the linear gradient from the URL specification here. So I'll save, and you can see that I get this linear gradient that's being applied on top of the URL, and it's black at the top and white at the bottom. So it's not quite what I want, but what happens if I make this, instead of being, let's say, white over here, I'll change this to be like Rgba, just like we have this light color over here. I'll make that over here, but instead of the 0.8, maybe I'll make it 0.2. So I'll save that and refresh. And now you can see we're already getting this darker color at the black color at the top, and it's transitioning slowly towards this very transparent version of black. And if we make this the same value, so I'll copy and paste this, copy, instead of black, I'll paste that. So I basically have two gradients of the same type so that the color is uniform all around. It makes it a little bit more legible. It just looks like I haven't darkened it enough. So let me make this to like 0.5 and we'll go from there. So I'll save that and come back. And now you can see that Sesame Chicken is clearly readable, whereas the image is sort of darkened, but this linear gradient is applied over the actual image that comes through. So that's one way to achieve that. And there's probably a bunch of other ways, which you'll find through CSS. There's often several ways of achieving the same thing. So I kind of like the look of that. Not perfect, but it's a good start. And we're going to continue learning some more things about how we can style this page to make it a little bit nicer in the next one. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.